mother and my sister lived in San Francisco.
Oh.
In fact, she went with me the first time I went up to People's Temple, but, it wasn't her cup of tea. She didn't want to have a strong leader, and I was more into politics and civil rights and things like that than she was at the time. So, it's kind of, once you go through a trauma, there's a certain kind of support that you get from being with people who already know, who've been through it too. It's just so hard to reintroduce yourself or pretend things that you're really a shallow person. It's so you don't tap into it. It's such a difficult setting to try and explain to people. We were just all more comfortable hanging out with each other. And even when I went to visit my mother, I was like a fish out of water. I didn't know what to do. So I was just more comfortable hanging out with the other survivors. So I did that for a year, and I kind of felt like I was just treading water. I went back to school and different things, but I hadn't really made a commitment to live through it. So for about a year, I just treaded water. I went to work, I got my paycheck, but I had no joy in my life. I didn't have a reason to keep going. And after about a year, I started hanging around with people from Synanon, which was a residential drug rehab program. And they played the Synanon game, which was kind of a group therapy and confrontation among friends. And really that the dialogue that I participated in and the freedom to say what I wanted to or cry whenever I needed to or, just kind of take care of my business and have somebody else nurture me and take care of me, that really got me through those tough times until I could finally say, okay, I'm committed now. I'm going to make a go of this. But I lived there for 10 years. It took me 10 years. I married my husband there in 1982, so we've been married 32 years now. My son was born in 1989. Yeah, and so by 1985, I was on the road to recovery, and then my family, was just giving me tremendous strength. And so I lived there until 1990 when the place fell apart. But it took me all those 10 years to really feel nurtured and protected before I could, break out of that and kind of grow up to what I had to do.
Sure. So when you returned, did you, I've heard various stories from, other survivors that have said that when they returned, it was almost as horrific as what went on in Jonestown because they were treated so horribly, called, murderers and baby killers and the whole thing. Did you have to experience any of that horrible?
Well, when I came home, at the very beginning, one of the mothers yelled at me because her son had been in Jonestown and she was back here. And one mother yelled at me, why wasn't her son saved instead of me? How could I survive? Why didn't her son survive? And, I didn't have an answer for that. It was totally a fluke that I would survive. Who would have thought it? I would never have thought that I'd have a different ending than, these 918 friends of mine. So, I didn't have an answer. But I stayed with the other survivors, and then I went to work, and I never told anybody outside this small group anything about my past. So I didn't, I didn't put myself in a position to be hated or not from outside because I never talked about it to anybody who didn't know. And actually, I didn't do that for many, many years.
Yeah. So what is the one thing that you can say you took away from Jonestown?
Well, I could survive anything. I already did.
Yes, you can.
Yeah. And so there's not, it doesn't really matter how big or small it is. I'm a survivor from everything that happens. And I do know that the world can be better than it is, and I'm never going to give up trying to make it better.
And good for you. I agree. So let's see. You answered the next question. It was how long before joining Synanon, but you already answered that. So when did you decide to become a Quaker?
Well, in 1994, I was living in Visalia. People's Temple had housing in, not Visalia. Hold on one second. In 1994, I had lived in Synanon for 10 years, and Synanon had housing in Tulare County. And so I had been living there up in the mountains, and when Synanon fell apart, I moved down into Visalia, and I lived there with my son and family. And early on, I wanted to have my son surrounded by people of integrity. And so, we protested and did pro-choice rallies and all kinds of different things. And I used to demonstrate against the war in Iraq in 1992 and 1993. And I, would demonstrate on the street corner with all these kind of peculiar-looking people. And then in 1994, one of my best friends was a Quaker, and she would take Raul, my son, to the Quaker meeting with her daughter, so they'd have, they could have fun together and play together. And then she moved away until Raul was 4 or 5, and he woke up on a Sunday morning and said, "Okay, let's go." And I said, "Honey, we're not going anyplace this Sunday. I read the paper and I kick back and, drink my coffee, take a break," because I was a teacher then. I do all this. He said, "No,
sure.
We're going to go to the Quaker meeting." And I said, "Well," and so he just persisted. He would not take no for an answer. So finally, my husband and I gave in. We went to the Quaker meeting, and it was the same people I had demonstrated with for 2 years. And so we fit right in there. And they were,
That's great.
They never proselytized or anything. They were just always there, always consistent, always gracious. And so it's just like, putting on a pair of shoes that already fit perfectly. It's like it was obviously the place for us. Yeah. And so really since then we just stayed with the Quakers, and now I'm real active with them and the Peace and Social Order and different things. So it's a good fit all around.
That's cool. So, you're married to a wonderful man, Ron, and your son, Raul, is kind, loving, and generous and very passionate. That's about the most any parent can ask for. So thank you for sharing your experience in your new book. Your book, Jonestown Survivor, An Insider's Look, is being sold at various outlets. What are some of these outlets that people can pick up your book?
Well, you can get it on Amazon.com. You can get it from the publisher, iUniverse. Also, if you want it signed, you can sign up for it on my website. My website is www.jonestownsurvivor.com. And I have a Facebook page, and you can contact me through then. But, I have a lot of people contact me on my website, especially after they read the book, and they have questions that weren't answered or some other questions. And also I do travel around the country, like I'm going to Tennessee next month, and I've been to universities, many universities across the country, and Quaker venues and bookstores, and all kinds of different venues. And I'm always looking for places that are interested in either the historical perspective of the 60s and 70s, or about new religions, or sociology, or survival and overcoming grief. All of those things are struggles that I've had.
Sure. So can you tell us a bit about your book as to, in terms of what it covers? And
yeah, it's really my autobiography. So it talks a little bit about growing up in Washington, D.C., and, we had people from Selma and other parts of the country who were fighting for civil rights come stay at our house and integrate our neighborhood. And so really early on, my mother was my role model in being an activist. And then, it kind of through my devastation in the 60s when we seemed to, abuse so many people who were so heroic. And then in the 70s, I was in People's Temple, and that consumed my life for the 70s. And then in the 80s, I was in Synanon. And by the 90s, I had become a Quaker, and I'd gone back to school for my psychology and philosophy bachelor's degree, and I became a bilingual teacher. So I've taught for about 25 years. I teach public education in elementary and middle school. And then I got involved with the Quakers, and I'm on the board of directors for the Communal Studies Association and a speaker for the Jonestown Institute. So it kind of just followed my evolution into being an activist and kind of living through a really tough time. And then, coming out the other end saying, I'm not going to just be a survivor. It's time for me to be a thriver and take charge of my life again. And so it's really that whole process.
Well, congratulations on Woman of the Year Award by the National Association for Professional Women. I read that on your website and was it's nice to see that. And you were nominated as Teacher of the Year at the school you teach at. Congratulations on that. Teaching is very important, and in today's world especially, I feel so sorry for teachers, lack of money and everything else going on in schools. So is there anything else you would like to add before we close the show?
Yeah, the one, I do a lot of speaking and people ask me questions, and sometimes I feel like I've heard all the questions possible, but then every once in a while another one crops up. I was speaking at a library in San Diego, and someone, an older black woman in the audience said, so I don't understand why black people would become part of People's Temple. What were they, the people who had given up life and they, were going there? What happened? And I said, it's really just the opposite. The people who joined People's Temple were the visionaries who said, you know what, it's going to be tough getting the world to be better, and we're going to do it. Whatever it takes, we're going to do it. So the people who joined Temple were the ones who made a commitment, whatever it takes, 24 hours a day, to make the world better, to have justice prevail, and, have this color line that divides our society and the racism that's so pervasive in so many sectors. It was time to get rid of it, and we said, okay, whatever it takes, we're going to do that. And so really, I consider the people of People's Temple the visionaries who really put everything, and eventually even their lives, into making the world better. We were not, just giving things up and letting someone decide for us. We thought we were making a choice of working hard to get the world better.
I agree. So I thank you for joining me on tonight's show. And anyone who would like to find out more about Jonestown can go to the Alternative Considerations of Jonestown website and visit Laura's website. You want to repeat your website address?
Yes, it's www.jonestownsurvivor.com.
Okay. And if you're interested in Laura's book, which sounds very interesting, you can order it online or on this website and get a signed copy if you would like to, and contact Laura if you have any questions. So thanks for listening to tonight's show. Join me tomorrow night on Never Niche Live when we discuss Facebook frauds, completely at the other end of the spectrum of tonight's show.
Although fraud is fraud.
Yeah, I'm going to close the show with You what?
I said fraud is fraud, and there was much that was fraudulent about what was going on in People's Temple that we weren't told about. But so it's not exactly opposite.
Well, you're right, and I guess so. I guess that is a good way of looking at it. But I'm going to close the show with another song from People's Temple Choir. Can you actually, before I do that, Laura, can you tell us a little bit about the choir and what they used to, where they used to sing?
Oh,
I know they used to travel, didn't they?
Yeah, they traveled a lot. I mean, we had the most magnificent choir. We had wonderfully talented people and people who, were so motivated to write their own original pieces of music or their own orchestra or different things. And so it was just a wonderful part of growing up in People's Temple was the music. And so we put out a record, but we sang at every service, and the kids had songs, and we recreated or rewrote a lot of the spirituals from early